Hello again. Today we are looking at the MK12 Mod 0 SPR. This is something that I've been working on for a long while now. I can't quite remember when I started this, but it's been a long time coming and it took a while to get all of this just right. Historically, the SPR MK12 Mod 0 came about as a result of Black Hawk Down, the events of Black Hawk Down, Operation Gothic Serpent and the disasters ensuing. Because what they found in there was that if you wanted to shoot someone at long range, then you had the option of an M14, which was big, heavy, and not particularly good for being accurate or accurized in any fashion, or a Kar-15, which we covered in the previous video, which, as you can imagine, is also not the greatest for accuracy. It's not terrible, but it's not the greatest and not as good as it could be. So the MK12 was born. It was then inducted into Special Forces of the US, Green Berets, SFG, SEALs, all that kind of thing. That was that for the Mod 0. Later the Mod 1 came around. The Mod 1 came afterwards and used a free floating rail. This is also a free floating rail, but Picatinny, all the rest of it. That may be something I do in future. I have the parts for it, but I think the Mod 0 is cooler personally. But hey, maybe a future thing. The MK12 has this big old tube for its handguard, and this is kind of one of the things that makes it distinctive in what it is. So what we've got is a precision reflex carbon fibre tube. This particular one is not made by Precision Reflex Industries. This is made by Madball. It is, however, still carbon fibre. And we have some lengths of Picatinny here on the sides and on the bottom that we can then screw in at any position-ish to get what we want on there. However, the most popular choice by far is to go 9, 3, 6. And that covers all your bases up front. And then you've got Bipod, Sling, and laser, which we will talk about all individually in time. Of course, the main thing for the program itself was to get a stable optics platform that retained zero. And the way they did that was with this big old arms rail that is hooked onto the receiver, attached to the receiver with, bolts and such, your usual affair, and then extends all the way out to the end of the rail. And it does also have, we see this section here with a big old hole in it that is not Picatinny. That is actually a dedicated mount for the PEC2. We would undo this screw here, which then takes off the mount, and then we would redo that screw through this hole here. However, you can see that if we did that, so the screw hole is here on the PEC, if we brought that back, even if you mounted it just like that, it simply doesn't work with the kind of scopes that the MK12 was built to use. And therefore, this ended up not being used in the lifetime of the MK12. However, that is what it is there for. And this one, it doesn't have threading, so I imagine you would bolt it in from... Oh, it does have threading in a little upper bit. Oh, okay, and there's a discrepancy. So yeah, yes, this is threaded as intended. Right, with our history lesson out of the way, our very quick 30-second history, let's start talking about exactly what we've got going on here. So let's start at the front and work our way back. First up, we have our Z-Parts MK12 suppressor. This is a direct copy of the Ops Inc. 12th model for 22 caliber. Obviously that is 223, otherwise known as 5.56. Not 2.2 long rifle that you may think of being the tiny one. This is a sleeve suppressor, just like the Kar-15, the M733, the Gordon carbine, etc., etc. It's just like it, but we can see that these lengths are different. The M4 style carbine suppressor is a little bit longer, and we do also have this collar system here that is very different to the collar system on there. This one attaches to the front sight post, but the MK12 one, let's do that, However, the Mark 12 one attaches slightly differently. So after unscrewing the Mark 12 suppressor, we can pull it off and reveal a muzzle brake and a collar. I have completely forgotten in the moment what the purpose of a muzzle brake is, but I'm sure you can tell me in the comments. And that is not the right way around. Typically, when this is not suppressed, we see it with this thread protector on, so we'll just pop that on because it looks nicer. Actually, before we do. So, Z Parts Mark 12 suppressor, Z Parts Mark 12 front end, and hopefully you guys can see a small shim in there. The purpose of this is to keep this muzzle brake level. Typically, with a lot of these kinds of builds, I will use an O-ring and then a shroud washer over the top to cover that O-ring, and then we can torque down a flash hider, muzzle device, whatever, onto it and get a high level of torque-ish, and also have that muzzle device be level. However, with the Mark 12 here, we have a few parts that work a little bit differently, and so we have to have a bit more degree of precision and getting things right in order for things to stay right. So, with the suppressor, it is coming over the collar, coming into the thread of this muzzle device, and it is torquing it in the same way that it can loosen itself. And so we want to have this as tight as possible so that you can actually screw on that suppressor and have it be stable on there. If you were to do the O-ring method, as I usually recommend, then that would not work. This would simply start unscrewing itself as soon as you start putting the suppressor on. So instead, I've done the proper way, and we have some shims in there, just the one shim actually it seems, but it's a thick one, to get the muzzle brake lined up. We have two parts of this. We have the muzzle device, of course, which is a muzzle brake, and we have the collar. The collar is a so it is a circular ramp, it's a cone, it's conical, there we go. And the outside of the Mark 12 suppressor fits onto that. And so because it is pressing down into it as it screws on, that is its method of centering itself. So that is how we get stability out of this system. It is not a great system by modern standards. However, you could arguably say that it is better than simply direct threading of the kind of precision that you could expect from the time that this came out. So it does the job. Now, let's put this back over because it's a bit hefty. Now, we also have a barrel here, of course. Now you have a couple of options for the barrel. One of the main options, one of the obvious options, is the Z Parts Mark 12 barrel. You would think that this is the best option if you want a Mark 12. And Z Parts do make absolutely incredible parts, they really do. This one is steel. However, there are two problems here. One, the steel is cheaper than the aluminium. Okay, so I got the steel because it was cheap. However, this is incredibly heavy. And it is heavy to the point where you don't feel recoil in the gun anymore when firing it, because this weight just dampens everything. This is actually heavier than my 20-inch G&P steel barrel. These are both steel. This one is noticeably heavier despite the fact that it's shorter. And it's because it is thick. This is so thick. So it is problematically heavy. And therefore, I don't want to use it. And therefore, I'm not going to use it. However, second problem that I forgot to mention, it does not fit into our SEMA. I believe this is the SEMA. Front sight / gas block, which is an integral part to the historical accuracy of, that hurts, of the Mark 12 Mod 0. While we're here though, we can see a few things going on. Namely, we have a few detents here. These are for this is actually the Mod 1 barrel, and so some of these are for the gas port of the Mark 12 Mod 1, which is a modern carbine style of gas block, which is actually visible on the build. It protrudes beyond the handguard. But we have detents for that, and then we have a separate detent for the collar. The reason for that, let's put this down gently. I tried. The reason that we have a detent for the collar is because, again, with the suppressor method of affixing, it is pressing this collar back with quite a lot of force. So you cannot simply put the grub screw of this collar into a flat barrel. It would just scratch all the way back. So for what I've done for the barrel, for starters, we have a stock Tokyo Marui 10.3 inch outer barrel. This is simply because I had more 10.3 inches than 14.5s, and it made more sense for me to use that because I do 14.5 inch builds more often, and so I would rather waste a 10.3 inch barrel on this build. Then I have got two cheapy barrel extensions. Let's find which lengths I've gone for. Our longer barrel extension is out the front, that is 160 millimeters. I also have a shorter barrel extension in between the front barrel extension and the outer barrel, and that would be that is 50 millimeters. It's 2 inches. The reason I have done that rather than try and gone for a full full extension that just matches up is because also the Mod H is very, very similar to this, but apart from other things, the barrel is shorter by 2 inches. And so I can just take out that middle piece, and then I have a 16-inch barrel as opposed to this, which is an 18-inch barrel. While I'm here as well talking about custom barrel length, because it is quite a relevant part of the build, we do have a 470 millimeter inner barrel here. This is a maple leaf, and that protrudes to just about be visible at the end of the flash hider. It is maybe protruding by 0.5 millimeter. It is a perfect length for what we've got going on here. And of course we do have Teflon tape, which is stabilizing that inner barrel within the outer barrel sections. That being said, when firing this quickly, we do still have BBs striking the end of the muzzle here. The inner barrel protruding here does not mean that that is fully stable. Even that small amount of distance, potentially combined with some sort of tolerance issue with the muzzle height, with the muzzle device, but I'm doubtful. When firing this quickly, we get muzzle strikes. It is still unfortunate. It's unfortunate, but it's what we got. Now, so coming back, so we have our Z parts front end. We have our custom barrel length and how we've done that. We have, so as I mentioned with the detent for the collar, this has a detent drilled under it under the barrel section. We have a detent drilled into the barrel section to then allow the grub screw that attaches this collar to go into that detent, and we can then take a lot more force and allow that suppressor to be mounted securely. So that is how we have secure mounting there. The front sight gas block, this is from SEMA. It is bought from, just some site, just search for SPR gas block or whatever, and I found it. It flips up. Cool, it locks. Press a button, it flips down. This is, however, a MK12 Mod 0. You're never going to use it. It is, however, historically accurate to the build. Coming back still, we have our Sommergear PEC 2. Like the suppressor, this is something that I usually do not use in gameplay. In fact, I pretty much, more often than not, don't use this during gameplay. The reason being it's extra weight, and this is actually, despite this being a carbon fibre handguard, it's actually quite a heavy gun already, after optics and bipod and all that kind of thing. So, yes, it's historically accurate, but it's more enjoyable to use the gun without it. That's what we've got on the right side. On the left side, I have a CQD sling mount. This is not clone correct or historically accurate to what was used at the time. What was used at the time was janky, if memory serves. I do not remember what these guys did for slings. For sling mounts. For slings we can talk about, VTAC, Blue Force, blah, 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 blah. But I don't remember what was done for sling mounts at the time. For historical accuracy, and learning about all that kind of thing, there is a very simple website to remember, ar15.com. And they have all kinds of clone correctness type stuff on there, including one for the MK12 Mod 0, and including one for the Block 2. So, CQD, and then of course we have the Hob Sling. It's a Hob, it's a sling. No, I'm the Hob, it's a sling. Sling wise, it goes over, and we've got a quick adjust in the front, we've got a slow adjust in the back, and life is good. The way I prefer to have it is simply in a case of 2-point, and slung in such a way that I can guard carry, walk around if I'm going back to spawn and I don't want to worry about it. Or if I swim out of it, then I can be in play in a patrol carry and I can have it and do whatever I want with it. I can bring it up and fire it, I can manipulate it and all that kind of thing. And because we have a long distance between our lower sling point and our upper sling point, I still have full control and I'm able to get the gun into the shoulder without any issue at all. However, if I wanted to manipulate the weapon like this, this is when we start having tightness and trouble. So we wouldn't do that generally. We do also have the option, let's make sure not to smash anything behind me, of popping it over the back, tightening up. Let's just get that nice and tight. Feels good. And then we have over the shoulder. Pretty good. I forgot to mention this last time with the Black Hawk Down video, with the Gordon Carbine video. This isn't technically something you would do usually often. That's still very tight. Where's it gone? Do that. You wouldn't technically do that very often. You wouldn't have reason to do it very often, really. Is that good? Yeah, a bit higher. Cool. Typically, if you want to carry it in a way that's not in the way, you do your mess hall carry. Muzzle down, nice and safe. If the weapon ever does fire for any reason, then that's not going to go anywhere. This is something you would typically see around mess halls. And you get all the signs saying, hey, muzzle down, no muzzle up, no, blah, blah, blah. And then you get shouted at if you ever do that, I assume. So that is our sling. Like I say, we have slow adjust at the back, which can then go between long guns, short guns, really short guns, really long guns actually, because we actually have a lot of adjustment left in this. But yeah, it's a sling. You can make your own sling. It's not difficult at all. So that's the sling. And let's go to the bipod. This is a genuine Harris bipod. This was expensive, but the reproductions are not good, which unfortunately is a bit of a theme for Airsoft, really, isn't it? Again, I've said this before many times, I wouldn't buy a genuine Harris bipod if the reproductions of whatever it was, you know, be it Harris bipods or sights, etc., if they didn't suck. But unfortunately, that is the case for this bipod. In this instance, so we have a reproduction up there. We can see our little knob here for tightening the tilt. Doing that destroys itself, basically. The plate that it's going onto, it's just not designed to do what it's designed to do. It's a bad design. Whereas on here, we have a big old dial here that can come off to loosen, come on to tighten. If we have it loose, then there's no problem. If we have it tight, then we'll talk about that. Then we do have more oh, is that in frame? That's probably not in frame, is it? If we have it tight, then of course we have it tight. If we have it loose, then we have it loose. And of course, legs come down. And the way that I have chosen to do this, so there are different models of this Harris bipod you can get. I have the 6 to 9 inch, and I have the version with the legs that you pull out, because that is, and then pop in, because that is how I've found that I am efficient, I guess, in that I pull the bipod down, pull the bipod down, and pull the bipod down, and pull the bipod down. and that is a flow that works for me. So that is our front attachment type stuff. As we've said before, this is onto Picatinny rail sections that are supplied with the handguard. Now, hopefully you noticed earlier, unless it was entirely out of frame, that the handguard came loose when I tried to adjust the bipod. This is a design flaw in the mechanism, in the way of attachment. We don't have much in the way of stuff keeping us secure for this. Unlike, for example, with a URGI rail, Mark 16, Daniel Defense rail, the RIS-2, and all that kind of thing. What you would typically have is, well, apart from anything, you would have the gas tube going through and going through holes in this barrel. Is the barrel nut? It is the barrel nut. And then that would go through to the receiver, and you would have at least a little bit of sort of tightness assistance, shall we say, or you would have Loctite. But in the airsoft world, we would have the gas tube going through, and that would at least keep things somewhat level. However, the way that this seems to be is that there is a measurement issue. A measurement issue, or potentially a wrong size of gas tube that I've tried to use. But it seems to be a measurement issue, in that it will go too high through one part, too low through one part, it doesn't fit, and then we cannot get the tube through that. So, as a result, we don't have anything like that, and also just as a native disadvantage of the PRI method of attachment for this handguard, it is possible for it to come loose unless we really tighten it down. I've pulled it the wrong way, and therefore I've actually loosened it. So what I would do, tighten it up as much as I can, and hey, that'll be good for another day or two. But really, what I should do is get a bit of Loctite in there. But I don't want to do that because I do change these bills out fairly frequently, and Loctiting that would be problematic. Also, of course, if I have any breakages of any kind that require taking this apart, then I'm just making it more difficult for myself in the long run. Nevertheless, that is what I should do, and it's just a bit of a hard pill to swallow. Unfortunate. Also, because this is a aftermarket handguard and on a stock Tokyo Marui barrel, what we also have in here is a barrel nut adapter. This particular one was made by Guns Modify, I believe. So this goes between barrel goes onto the receiver, and then the adapter goes over the top of the barrel and then the barrel nut goes over the top of that. The reason for this is that the foot of the Tokyo Marui stock outer barrel is not wide enough to be held in by a normal barrel nut of an aftermarket rail. If we look at the Z Parts one, for example, this comes out, this ring here is a lot wider than the, brain? Yes, this ring is a lot wider than the one on the stock Tokyo Marui outer barrel. But if we were to have the Tokyo Marui outer barrel and then just any barrel nut of a non-standard handguard of the Tokyo Marui, the barrel, this area of the barrel would simply just pass through the ring back and forth. And so you can tighten that down as much as you want, but if you then go to fire it, the barrel will just come off. It is now time to put the Mark 12 barrel down again. I am sorry. It is a bit heavy. So, adapter. We also have a 3D printed shoe that is sitting in front of the, so it is sitting inside the barrel nut, facing forward in a cone. All of that is doing is just a custom job because the gas tube I have in there is a little bit short, doesn't quite fit into the barrel nut, and so if I didn't have that, then this gas tube just wobbles about, and so 3D printed spacer, jam that down and get it all nice and secure. Good. So, the handguard itself, of course, as I mentioned previously, is the Madball carbon fibre PRI front end. I believe the length of this is called the 12.5, but of course it is simply the longest one, and is of course the round one. There is a triangular one as well that I've been semi-tempted by, but it doesn't have the historical significance of the Mark 12 Mod 0. Next up, let's talk about this big old rail. This comes with No, it didn't come with it. This was a separate purchase to the handguard, but it is also made by Madball. It is not a clone of a PRI product, it's a clone of an ARMS product, because ARMS was the company that made the top rail that then ended up being used with this. Again, the purpose of this simply is to create a stable sight platform that extends out a bit further than what we can do with the receiver. Bear in mind, this is a point before dedicated cantilever mounts that we expect to see nowadays from things like LPVOs and such, where we can mount something like this onto the receiver and it pushes it out more naturally. Let's see if I can get something. Okay, so this is a modern alternative to getting a similar job done to what we see here, similar-ish. This is a Vortex Razor HD Gen 2E 1-6, and we can see that it is on what we call a cantilever mount. What we have here, let's do this, bring that level. We'll try not to bump the mic too much, and we'll have a look at what we've got. So we have, let's say, our forward most sighting point, mounting point here, and that can go onto the receiver, obviously not that way up, but it can sit there. And we can see that our adjustment turrets come forward, the scope comes forward, the mounting point comes forward, and it pushes the scope forward of where otherwise its maximum length of mounting point would be. However, this was made in a time before that existed. So, if we look at where this scope is, and we see what our most forward-most mounting point would be, that's miles away from the receiver. From there, we have arms that made this rail, and then that clomps onto the receiver, pushes out, and gets us a point of stability that can travel much further out, and allows us to mount scopes much further out. In terms of why this is mounted as far out as it is, there are a couple of considerations. One is weight, one is eye relief of the scope, and another is weight balance. So, oh boy, I should have prepared something to say to explain this, because now I'm going to have to figure it out. Where your scope is related to where your stock is, and where your stock is related to where your weight is. So, if I have, let's say I have the stock all the way in, and I'm using the gun like that. For starters, obviously, I can't use the scope like this, I'm far too close. I can't see a thing through that. So, our benefit of this is that our weight is closer in, and so we can manage it more effectively. However, in order to do this, I would need to mount the scope so much further forward that I would end up with a weight balance issue. Quite a severe weight balance issue. And not to mention the fact that that's only really possible with a rail that comes full length down the receiver like this. And even then, I wouldn't really classify that as being the most stable of platforms out at the end here. So that's not really a great solution. If we were to have it all the way back, and let's say we have it too far back, it's not too far back for this scope, it's a good scope and so it's fine. But then when we're up and in it, that is very quickly taxing. And so we have issues there of weight management and management of your shoulders. So we have the scope in it, so we have the stock in a little bit, and a little bit out further than that, because I have it set back a bit. And then we're fine. And then we manage where our scope is placed to fit in line with that. The way that you can do that, there's a couple different ways of doing it, because you can set it to your stock length and you can set it to your scope eye relief, and you can kind of manage one against the other when choosing where to put your scope and where to put your stock. Another consideration to take into account is that if you're using something very short, like an ACOG with a very short eye relief, that necessitates you having the stock all the way in, you can end up, if you're weak like me, you can end up with joint issues because of the grip angle being problematic. So if you're holding up weight up here for long periods of time, that can be a problem for some people, but not others. So that really depends on what your priorities are and what your capabilities are. For me, however, I have this mounted I think this is maybe a notch forward of the furthest back it can go. This is quite a long eye relief scope. There is my perfect eye relief. You'll notice, however, that I'm having to lean forward slightly in order to get that perfect eye relief, and that's because I set the stock so that I'm set back slightly. The reason I do that is because being a heavy gun and being a designated marksman rifle with a bipod, it is designed to be suitable for shooting prone. When you are shooting prone, so shooting standing, as you go down, your head goes forward. And so when you're shooting prone, your eye will naturally be quite a lot closer to the scope, and you don't really want that for obvious reasons. It can cause problems. So set the stock slightly further back, and therefore you have less problems. And if you do want to take the time and extend the stock further back while you're in the prone, if you have the time to do that, well then you have the time to do that, don't you? That's not a problem at all. So that is why we have done that. Now, for optics, there are two main things that set the Mark 12 Mod 0 apart. First off, we have a 30mm tube scope with a 40mm-ish objective lens. And the second is ARM's number 22 low mounts, I believe. I think I've got the number right. Yeah, I've got the number right. Specifically with this Picatinny section, either up front or behind, but usually up front. So, here we have a Vortex Viper HST 4-16 by 44. What that means, taking this off because it's bad for my neck. What that means is it is a 4 times magnification at its lowest end. It is a 16 times magnification at its highest end. It is indeed. Can't see a thing through that because the nearest object is like 3 meters away. And so is the furthest object. By 44 means that it is a 44mm objective lens. So it is 4mm bigger than the Leupold Mark IV that this is impersonating, but it is close enough. One thing worth noting, with some scopes but not others, the eye relief can change depending on your zoom level. Some scopes do, some scopes do not. For example, the far more modern Vortex Razor down there, the LPVO, that does not change. So your 1 times distance from the scope, eye relief, is exactly the same as the maximum magnification, 6 times. Your eye can be in exactly the same place and you have exactly the same experience. However, for this, if you're in one particular position for 4 times and everything is good, and then you crank it up to 16, you'll find that you're better off coming just a little bit further forward. So the eye relief does change just a little bit on this scope, and it's a fairly common thing. So that's what we have for, let's maybe explain this scope a little bit more before we get to the precise bits of the mount. So these scope turrets, are uncapped, non-lockable, and free clicking. So we can just grab it, and we can adjust it as much as we need. There's no lock on here at all, and there's no cap on there at all. So it is exactly just nice and easy, super quick, no problem at all. This is generally what I'm most a fan of. If we take another look at the Razor, for example, these are non-locking, but they are capped. So this is to stop any kind of bumps, adjusting them and that kind of thing. And then once we have it off, we have free clicks to do as full rotation as we want to do. Obviously, I don't want to mess with my 0. And then we can pop the cap on and everything is good. With this one, however, there is no need to remove any caps. We can just adjust it and there's no problem at all. We also have, as well as the zoom adjustment, obviously, this is quite a stiff zoom adjustment, but it's not really clone correct to have a throw lever on there. We also have a diopter adjustment, so that is for making sure that your reticle is clear when you're looking at target distance. And we also have a parallax adjustment. Parallax adjustment, so parallax is that your point of aim, the center of your crosshair, may not actually be where it should be if your eye is not on center, basically. Now, that is the basics of parallax, and this happens at many distances, unless you correct for it. But if you correct for it, then you can only really correct for it You can only correct for it 100% at a certain distance. Usually this distance is about 100 meters, 100 yards, and that is sort of the standard for how you address this. However, on long range scopes, on precision scopes, we have a parallax adjustment. And so that is adjusting the distance at which that parallax is perfected for. So let's say we're shooting at a target 200 meters away. If I can set this to, there we go, that's now precisely set to 200 meters. If I am shooting at a range on if I'm shooting at a target on a range at 200 meters, and I have the parallax set for 200 meters, I now know that I am not being affected by parallax. And so therefore, if my eye is slightly off center, then I am not going to have a problem with the scope not being on 0. Personally, however, of course, this being an airsoft gun, I crank this way down to its minimum setting, which is 50 yards. So, parallax, top point is elevation, self-explanatory. Windage, self-explanatory. And diopter, covered that, and that's that. We also have Butler Creek scope caps with comedic timing, thank you. The top cap does not like to stay on at all. It is correctly sized, however it does have issues staying on and likes to pop off at random moments. Thank you. That annoys me a little bit, but hey, that is what it is. I bought these because I like the vibe of having the little red bit that just does that. It's something we see in video games. It's something you see, you know, oh, the cool sniper man, he's got the little red bit on his scope. Oh, and so that's why I've gone Butler Creek, which is the company that makes those. I'm a nerd. Alright.
You're probably one of the little fuckers who got me in the bush.
No.
Did you hang around the left side of your map?
No. I've just put this one together for now. I was using the short range thing, don't worry.
What's the optics like?
Pretty good. So, genuine Vortex, 40-16. It's about 600 quid worth. Go have it. It's not shooting the correct ammo at the moment. I'm just getting rid of what's in there.
I'll have a few on that if you want.
Sure.
Only a few. I need to pop my gun.
Sure.
Oh, that's sick. That's so cool.
How do I turn this one on? Is it this dial down?
It is, yes. Twist it.
Mounts. This is going to be something that is quite important to Mark 12 Mod 0 builders, if you want to build your own. These are bought from a site called airsoftglobal.com. You cannot get these really from anywhere else. They are all classed as discontinued, specifically the Airsoft reproductions. You can try buying new ones, arms, number 22, low, because I believe they are still produced. However, if you're not in the United States of America, then that is a bit tricky, isn't it? So if you're like me, and you are unfortunate not to be born there or living there, then getting an Airsoft reproduction is really one of your only options. There are also dedicated importers and all that kind of thing, but that's not something that I have tried myself, and so it's not something I can provide an experience on. So what I bought exactly was the 2 main rings, and then, no, was it 2 main rings? I can't remember. There was something particular about getting the top part, which meant that I bought more than I needed to. Really, I just recommend doing the same. It doesn't end up being that expensive. These rings are not very high quality, unfortunately. They do the job. Like, there's obviously not going to be any movement or looseness in this at all. But when threading it in, it did feel like the screw threads were maybe not the highest quality. And so as a result, I have not actually taken these off or unmounted the scope since putting it on, because you know what? It works, and so I'm not going to touch it. What I do have a plan for in future is maybe, I've seen a very cheap thermal camera that can go on Picatinny. I do wonder if an Airsoft DMR could benefit from a thermal up the top like that, but that's a future plan. So arms mounts, of course, that is what we're used to. These are not treated particularly well, and so we can see the beginnings of some oxidization there. Not a particularly big deal as long as you stay on top of it. I will just need to get some gun oil. I have a little spray of gun oil. WD-40 will also work as a very temporary measure. But yeah, just wipe that off. So you put some gun oil onto a piece of kitchen paper, and then just wipe off the rust, the oxidization. It's not full rust yet, and then that will be totally fine. And that will be no problem at all. Minor clone correctness point, of course, that with arms mounts, typically you have them both facing each other, and that is the case with the MK12 Mod 0 as well. However, on here they both face in the same direction, and they are not able to mount with them both facing each other. Not that big a deal as far as I am concerned, because the alternative is not having these kinds of things at all, and like I say, it's a fairly important part of what makes the MK12 Mod 0 SPR what it is. So, scope, mounts, caps. Okay, we're good for that. Let's talk about, the rear sight. So, we talked about the front sight. That is from SEMA. It's just called the SPR front sight. The rear sight is a bad clone of the ARMS number 40 high. High? Is it called the high, or is it just called the 40? It's not a high quality copy at all. This was made by a company called A&K, which are generally terrible. The issue that they have mainly is in their metallurgy. It is very, very soft metal, and so the screw threads that come with these and that are built into the mount are simply not good. I got lucky with this because I also bought a Garda number 40 low mount. Very similar concept, but it is low, obviously. But the screw of this was so bad, but I got lucky because I bought this beforehand. And so I replaced the screw of this, because it's a proprietary screw, you can't just buy one off the internet. But I replaced it with that, and therefore I have a a fixed rear sight. Whether it's working or not, again, it's A&K, it is so bad that I don't want to touch it. But it is there for function, and it doesn't matter how much I knock or jimmy that or anything, it's going to be totally fine, and it is on there as tight as you like, and it is good. Next, our charging handle. This is a reproduction of the PRI Gasbuster charging handle. So, one of the problems that people had with using suppressors on older carbines was that gas would be pushed back, so you'd get back pressure, and the gas of the weapon firing would come back through the charging handle into the shooter's face. One, that's quite unpleasant, and two, the people that suffered from that are now doing lawsuits and suffering quite severe health issues as a result of that, which is very, very unfortunate that that those people went through those things and then had that from it. So we then have the PRI Gasbuster. So this is a fat charging handle, and the job that it does is to try and seal up this aperture that would otherwise have gas coming through it. I don't know about the efficacy of this, because I don't know how many of those lawsuits are coming from people that had this installed. I'm not sure. But the intention of it was to stop that back pressure coming back. We can see here that it has an enlarged latch, and everything else is just a little bit larger as well. It just feels like a larger charging handle, and it's just a bit chunky, and it fits the look, and it looks good. So this one with the markings is from a company called Airsoft Artisan. I generally have pretty good experience with Airsoft Artisan. I haven't had a bad experience yet from them, and I have used a fair few of their products. So this particular one is a PRI charging handle, and it's made by Airsoft Artisan. There is also one by GMP, but it does not have markings. So that's not something I would necessarily recommend, but it's just a charging handle, you know, dude. It's fine. It really depends on how particular you want to be. Our upper receiver is just a standard Tokyo Marui MWS upper receiver. There's nothing that really requires changing here, and that's fine. Of course, for internal upgrades, we have our standard affair that I do for all of my MWSs, where I can, the Nova notwithstanding, So we have a Lilac strike arm in here with a, well, we have the upgraded inner barrel with the maple leaf that comes out to the end, but a standard Tokyo Marui bucking, Lilac strike arm, which I said, so we can lift those 0.36 gram BBs with no effort at all. And the bolt has an upgraded nozzle return spring from Eagle 6 and a Feder Concepts end pass. It is called the Feder valve. A GMP roller bolt end. No, yes, sometimes. Depends, because this is actually the standard Tokyo Marui buffer tube, and that does not fit in there. But yeah, we have our primary bolt that we put in there to then get our perfect performance. And life is good. So that is the internals of that. Currently, our lower receiver for this is the Nova one. So this is off of the M733 from the Black Hawk Down Gordon carbine that we covered in the previous video. This is not something that I do very often, but typically what I do is I will bring a rifle and then I'll bring the Mark 12 Mod 0 upper. So quite commonly, there's been a few times now where I'll bring the M4 Block 2, but I'll also bring the Mark 12 upper. And so then it sits on the M4 lower and it's a good time. But more recently, I brought the Gordon carbine and with its lower, and then brought the Mark 12 Mod 0 upper with that. Not all, I wouldn't say that all MWS uppers are exchangeable with all MWS lowers. If we take, you know, the Double Eagle, the SEMAs, the CGS, CMG, all that kind of thing, I would be hesitant to say that everything is compatible with everything, because that's not really the nature of how these things are. However, in this case, Nova has not had a problem at all in integrating one with the other. So, currently we have that, and if we want to be particularly particular, then this lower receiver has M16A2 markings, which is technically more clone correct for the Mark 12 Mod 0. So, standard pistol grip. You can get the Ergo pistol grip if you want that, but the standard one is historically accurate as well. No problem there. Semi-lock selector, of course, just so that we can have our muzzle velocity nice and high if we want. Everything else is standard there. We have our PRI style thing there, and the rest is just the same lower receiver as we would expect from whichever donor gun it's using, basically. So if it's the M4 Block 2, then we have all our M4 Block 2 bits and bobs, and if it's the M733, then we have that. In terms of clone correctness for what that kind of thing is, technically this castle nut probably isn't clone correct, but it's just a castle nut. The stock itself, Car 15 stock, totally fine. The stock mod stock, totally fine. And of course, the vibe for this is totally fine as well with the solid stock. However, I do not have a lower that lives with a solid stock yet. Budget. I'm planning to, I'm thinking of doing it, but at the moment I am swapping between buffer tubes and solid stocks, and it takes a little while, and you've got to respace the bolt and everything to make sure that you're not damaging your lower receiver, and it's a bit of a hassle, so I am considering buying another MWS. Hey, you know, I have no excuse other than that. But yes, Car 15 stock, totally fine. Stock mod stock, totally fine. Solid stock, totally fine. Now, let's check my notes, and let's make sure I haven't missed anything. 10.3 inch barrel, with our barrel lengths being 160mm and 2 inch. The black one is painted. Yes, we have painted our front barrel section there, because originally it was a very cheap looking finish and I didn't like it, and so it has been repainted. 470mm inner barrel with Teflon tape. Even then, BBs can strike the end of the muzzle brake if firing rapidly. I've got some footage for that. Hopefully I remember to show it earlier. Z-Parts front set for collar and brake. Yep, SEMA Mod 0 front sight. Doesn't fit over the Z-Parts Mod 1 barrel. Yep, we covered that. Drilled indent in the front section for the collar. Yep. Necessary because the suppressor has to push it back in order to stabilize itself. 3D printed spacer. Yep. Scope caps. Oh, we do not have a bubble level on this. Not that it's really a clone correct thing to have on this, but you do see when it comes to airsoft DMRs and snipers, you do see a lot of people that buy bubble levels for them, and they're like, well, it's because of hop performance. If I am off level by a millimeter, then it will be off. And therefore, because you're hopping the BB, it will go woo because you're off by a millimeter. That is absolutely true, but it is absolutely true that if your flight path is incorrect, then your flight path will be incorrect. However, perfectly level does not mean a perfectly straight BB travel. When there is a bit of wind going, so let's say I've got a bit of right to left wind going, I will absolutely come over just a touch, and then I'll just watch it go whoo in a perfect straight line because I am canting it over a little bit into the wind. A bubble level is never going to assist me with that. And although sure, a bubble level is nice in theory, in practice I've found that doing it by feel, and hey, if I miss, just adjust and then feel better next time, I find that that's totally fine. And so a bubble level, sure, oh, it will make you better. Nah. Maybe in a case of spring rifles where you do have a bit more ability to get first shot perfection. With this, you know, temperature, gas pressure, etc. First shot perfection is maybe not as common. For this, actually, if I took a shot right now, I would know where it goes. And I'm really happy with that as a DMR platform. But for gas guns generally, that is not something that you can... For a fair amount of gas guns, that's not something you can maybe expect too much of because of pressure differences causing differences in muzzle velocities and as a knock-on effect causing differences in hop performance. If you're firing with more energy, then more energy goes from the BB, no, more energy goes to the BB from the hop, from that nub, bring it under, and therefore a faster muzzle velocity will give you a little bit more hop. And for DMR purposes, yeah, that can affect accuracy a little bit. Gas blowback rifles are not as inaccurate as a lot of people claim, or rather it's not as inaccurate as myths have evolved. Because people using a gas blowback rifle as a DMR is more feasible than people have come to believe, because there has been not necessarily an echo chamber as such, but there is an element of people chasing perfection with their gas blowback rifles, and which is totally fine and valid. Hey, that's what we all love to do. But in chasing perfection, they see their previous states as being bad. Hey, okay, that's understandable as well. It's a natural thing of improvement to see your prior self as being bad. That's fine. We all look at things that we said maybe 10 years ago and go, oh, because that's the nature of self-improvement. However, if someone else comes into, you know, that forum, that Reddit post, whatever, and they say, oh, it used to be bad before I put a grand's worth of upgrades in it, then sure, people are going to come to that conclusion of, oh, okay, right, gas blowback guns are bad before you put a grand's worth of improvements in it, and that's how you get that myth spreading. One, usually you don't need to put a grand's worth of upgrades into a gun in order to make it good, be it AEG, HPA, spring, gas, whatever. If you need that much, then it's probably a bad gun to begin with. Second, the stock performance of an MWS in particular is good. However, that Laylac strike arm does allow you to lift heavy ammo, which does make it good in a heavy ammo range, which then increases the ceiling of how good it can be. And for gas blowback guns in general, there are absolutely limitations that can be present in gas blowback rifles. For example, with our L86 here, it's a WE, and therefore our tolerancing for gas sealing, particularly between the magazine and the nozzle, is not always as good and consistent as something that we would expect from an MWS. Therefore, your muzzle velocity is going to be a little bit more inconsistent. And this is a common design flaw of lack of precision in its tolerancing that you see from some brands. Some cheaper brands, particularly like VFC, like Double Eagle, like Golden Eagle, and all those kinds of brands. Whereas And then some other guns have separate issues with hop performance, for example. VFC in particular tends to have issues with hop consistency these days. And you have aftermarket companies that are coming out with hop chambers to try and remedy this with various levels of success. And from what I recall, not consistent levels of success. But hey, I'm not a VFC guy. I would like to be, but just, you know, budget and all that kind of things. So I don't have a first account of VFC ownership. Heavy Recoil Club is your friend, as always. But yeah, using a gas gun as a DMR is not necessarily a stupid thing to do, because you can get the same muzzle velocity, you can get a very similar muzzle velocity consistency, and you can get pretty much the same hop consistency out of this as you can from an AEG. And especially when it comes to cheaper AEG DMRs, this can outshoot it, because of that hop consistency is better in one of these due to tighter tolerancing than cheaper AEG DMRs such as ENC, for example. So, gas DMRs can be good, gas DMRs can be fun, gas DMRs can be feasible and competitive. I guess I'm not a competitive person, but the fact that I can point this at a person and know whether I'm going to hit him or not, then I pull the trigger and I hit him, means that, hey, this in its role, sure, it's good stuff. That being said, in terms of competitiveness, it is heavier than it needs to be because of the historical accuracy associated with it. I could take this scope off, put on a much lighter scope that only goes up to, you know, maybe a 1 to 4 LPVO or whatever, and still have good enough optical performance for Airsoft. I could take off all of this PEC and you take off the Bipod, have a shorter barrel, maybe not this fat old long thing because you don't need the arms rail anymore, all that kind of thing. You can lighten the guts out of this and still have DMR performance and have it be shorter, lighter, easier to maintain, not easier to maintain, well, with the handguard, maybe easier to maintain, easier to use, easier to play with. But you wouldn't have a Mark 12.
Right, now, this is on the way that it's in. Have a go at that. So it will drift up a little bit and then drop it in.
I love this sight.
Next one for you.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To Jerry.
That is so fucking, yeah, that's seriously fucking moving, that, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a 3.6 as well.
And that is what it comes down to for quite a lot of my builds, as you've probably noticed by now. I do enjoy the historical significance of these and the history behind them. And so that is one of the reasons, one of the main reasons that I chose to go for the Mark 12 Mod 0. In terms of cost, well, it cost too much. The barrel, super cheap, just because it was just eBay barrel extensions. Inner barrel, of course, was a bit more, 50, 60 quid maybe. This front end, one of them came into the country like 6 months ago or something silly. And I managed to get in contact with the store before it was known that it was coming in by anyone in the public. But the guy in the store knew. So he said, hey, we got one coming. And so I just got on it, watched that store every day. The guy emailed me when it came in, and he scalped the fuck out of me for it. So I paid way more than I otherwise would have, and this handguard ended up being about 400 quid just for a reproduction handguard. It is genuine carbon fibre and it does feel good. And if I were to Loctite it against the barrel nut, no, if I were to Loctite the barrel nut against the receiver, then we wouldn't have that torquing issue. But nevertheless, this was quite expensive. Likewise, and I'm factoring in the cost of the arms rail, again, reproduction for our Mad Bull, into that cost. So expensive. And then the scope itself, the scope is worth about 700 quid. I got lucky and got it on a slight deal for a bit of a reduction, but still, it's an expensive scope. Very capable scope though. Their clarity is excellent. The eye box in particular, I can really move around and have it be good. And our eye relief tolerance is excellent as well. So excellent scope, but high price. Rings, didn't cost that much. They're cheap reproductions. The PEC 2, 70 quid. Harris Bipod, 150-ish. So I think for our upper receiver, we end up yeah, we end up quite far over £1,000 for that. 1,200, 1,300 at a guess. And of course, including our Z parts front set, we definitely get over 1,200 quid for the upper receiver alone. And then of course the lower receiver is, again, the donor of whatever it is. This particular one is the most expensive one I have from the M733, but it's difficult to put a price on that simply because, you know, it came as part of a set and etc, etc. But yeah, about 1,200, 1,300 quid for the upper receiver alone to build out this Mark 12 Mod Zero SPR. Would I recommend it? Nowadays, you have an alternative. You have an alternative made by T8, I believe. T8 in conjunction with a company called FCW to get an MWS Mark 12 Mod H. It is not the Mod Zero, so it has a shorter outer barrel and it does not have this front sight post, and doesn't have the front sight post, and also doesn't have this long rail at all. Typically, what you would do for a Mod H is you'd have a half-length rail. Let's see if I can find mine. So typically you have something called a recce rail for the Mark 12 Mod H, and that goes up to that far. And then that screw hole actually goes into a hole in the top of that and keeps everything stable, and actually stops this undoing itself. This is actually a 3D printed part that I've designed and built myself. So that's how far that would go. You don't get that with the T8, and so it's not a perfect Mod H. And it's made by FCW, this front end, which are historically crap. So, okay, let's give a personal experience of FCW just to not drag them without reason. I bought their AK-74 kit for the VFC AK-74. Love that thing. No mags for it though. So triangle folding stock and a wood kit. It's neither of those because the wood kit really looked bad and didn't fit the AK-74 that it said it was a direct fit for, and it needed padding out to get it in there. And the triangle stock also didn't fit, and it was at the wrong angle, so it didn't go into the latch. And again, FCW claimed this to be a direct fit for the VFC AK. And not only that, but the finish on the stock just wore away immediately. It was an absolutely terrible purchase. I do not recommend that at all. I do not recommend FCW at all. And whenever someone has said, oh, I'm going to get one too, I immediately recommend either not doing that or refunding and cancelling the order if they can. So hearing that there is a Mark 12 being made by FCW, no. Personally, I do not recommend that at all. So let's say that somehow you can get a Madball carbon fibre front end like this, or even the polymer one, because you can't feel that this is carbon fibre, honestly. You can look inside and it looks weird, which makes me believe that it is carbon fibre, as it is listed to be. But yeah, you can't feel it externally, so the polymer version would just be fine. But yeah, if you were to spend 1,200 quid to build a Mark 12 Mod Zero SPR, it comes down really again to the same thing I always say. If it is, so with an M110, if you want an M110, then that's an amazing version of it, that's the VFC. If you want an L86 and you want to spend that, you know, all of those hours and that money building out an L86, then hey, that's fantastic, you can do that. Same with the Block 2. If you want a Mark 12 Mod Zero, then this is a fantastic option to do so. You can try, if you're in America, you can try getting a real PRA front end, and that could possibly end up being cheaper. You would have to rethread your upper receiver because the receiver threads of the MWS in particular are not deep enough, or AEGs in general, and so you would have to rethread them. But that is a potential option for you if you want to go that route. Really, this front end is the hardest part to get out of all of this. But yeah, in terms of monetary cost, I have no regrets. I really don't. It is a bit heavier than I was expecting, but I don't regret it. And yeah, it's not, obviously, it's not something I would recommend saying in terms of, hey, if you've never heard of the Mark 12 before, you should build a Mark 12. You know, you should be a Mark 12 bro with me. Build one, spend the money. No, I'm never going to recommend that you spend money on something that you don't innately have an interest in. So in terms of that kind of thing, no, this is too expensive to spend money on an impulse buy for the end result, because the end result is a DMR that is heavier than it needs to be. I feel like I just summed myself up in every single way imaginable, and now I have nothing left to say. Yeah, it's expensive, but if you don't have an innate desire for a Mark 12 Mod 0 SPR, then it's too expensive. If you do have an innate desire for a Mark 12 Mod 0 SPR, then I recommend building one, because I do really enjoy this. Like I say, it's a bit heavier than expected, but the capabilities of it are fantastic. It does have downsides compared to the Block 2, with the main downside being, for me, that I like to change around my builds a lot. And so, you know, long range version, short range version, all that kind of thing. Whereas the Mark 12, this is the Mark 12. You can change out the, you know, the stock, but really your front end is set as it is. And for me, now that I've completed this is going to be set as it is. This is actually, so this upper receiver has sat like this for a little while now, and it's going to continue to do so because of that inner barrel. I don't want to be faffing about with this now that it is perfect, and you know, doing all that kind of thing. If I were to change builds of this, I would have to change the inner barrel. It would be a pain. I'm not going to do it. So this is, as it stands, this upper receiver is always going to be a Mark 12 of some kind. It may change to, well, it wouldn't change to Mod H now that we've got that inner barrel in there, but in future it absolutely might change to a Mod 1 with the Knights Armament style rail, this one here, which is made by Z Parts again. But for now, this is a Mod 0, and it's going to stay like that for a very long time, and I am very glad of that fact, because I'm glad I made one. Zero regrets, and I am a fan. Ladies and gents, the Mod 0 is fantastic, and that is all I have to say on the matter. Usually at the end of the video, I will say, you know, like a question or something like that, and try and see how you guys feel about certain things. For this one, really? I mean, hey, just let me know what you think, really. I want to know what you guys think of gas blowback rifles and gas blowback DMRs, because there are a lot of, you know, myths and misconceptions about all that kind of thing. And I want to know what you guys think about this kind of thing, because there may be a conversation to be had there in terms of, you know, any kind of misconceptions or any kind of knowledge that's just kind of bedded in over a very long time and maybe isn't quite the case anymore. Yeah, that's what I want to hear. What do you think of gas blowback rifles? Because I'm a massive fan of them, and I hope you are too. Thanks for watching.